You can't talk about beer in Kansas City without talking about Boulevard Brewing Company. Since 1989, Boulevard has been setting the standard for great beer right here in the US. Its impact extends far beyond Kansas City. Today we're going to get a taste of how that all started and how this iconic brewery still remains a quintessential part of the Kansas City community. From innovation to collaboration, it's time to hear the real story of Boulevard Brewing. Kind of like a brewery tour a little bit. When we really get into the step of making the beer, the brew kettle is where it starts to happen.
Yeah, so this is our original brew kettle. It was built in 1930, came from a really small town in Germany. Our founder, John McDonald, he found it for sale in the mid-80s, had it shipped over. And this is what we brewed on exclusively until about 2007. When it was first manufactured, first use, it's called a stack system. Everything starts up here and works its way down. But we had to get creative because we started with a brew kettle that was too big for us. And then when it became too small for us, we had to find ways to make it big. Everything that this does, it mashed, it lautered, it boiled. We took those steps of the process, broke them out into separate tanks so that we could have a continuously running from the mash tank to the lauter to the boil to the Whirlpool. And that helped us produce 100,000 barrels on a system that was designed to do maybe 10. And adding all of these other tanks kind of satisfied that. The brick building that we're in was built in the 1860s. It was built for the railroad. And that company went out of business in the 1960s and the building was vacant. But this is the building where our founder, John McDonald, when he moved to Kansas City, he was a carpenter. Yeah. This was his carpentry studio. This is the space he rented. Okay. This is also the room he homebrewed in. And over the years, this room has had a lot of functions. In its current form, this is a solution that we had to solve. Anytime you add a non-traditional brewing ingredient to a beer, after it's sterile, you run the risk of contamination. So we had this equipment installed. That right there is a flash pasteurizer. So what we do is we run the beer through those pipes at the top for about 15 seconds and the temperature is around 120 degrees. And that's quick enough and hot enough that it will kill off anything that might have gotten into the beer. So what we do is we brew the beer, send it to that tank, run it through the pasteurizer and fill it here. So this beer is ready to go. We'll send it to the bright tank and then package it. And we know that nothing is going to be in that beer that will affect the end result. So this was something that we had to invest in order to keep doing these really fun beers. We had to find a way to do it efficiently.
All of your brewing is here, right? There's
everything is done here. The only thing that's done offsite is, so we do a lot of barrel aging, and that's where we take a new beer, add it to a spirits barrel. At one point, we were doing that here, and we had maybe 100 spirits barrels, but now we've got a library of about 5,000 casks, and so we have a warehouse that's about 10 miles south where those barrels live. So the beer is still brewed here. We put it on a tanker truck, tanker it down there, and then the reverse happens. When they're ready, they will blend certain barrels together, fill a tank, that tank comes here, it gets filtered, it gets sent to the bright tank, and then packaged from here. After fermentation, the beer still has, it's beer now, but it still has a lot of sediment that we probably don't want in the glass, right? So we run it through the centrifuge, and inside this is a series of conical discs that spin at 4,200 RPM, and then as beer passes through, it expels any heavy particulate out to the side. We don't control the spin rate, that's a fixed rate. What we control is the flow rate. So if we want something to be hazy, like unfiltered wheat, we'll send it through quickly because we don't want to expel all that sediment out. But something that's clear, like the Southwest Boulevard you had, we're going to slow it down and give it plenty of time. If we want something crystal clear, it'll go through this centrifuge first, this is the workhorse, and then it'll go through the second centrifuge to give us brilliant clarity. The entire room is our lab, and it's sectioned off into thirds. So that third over there is where we keep all of our yeast. That's where we do all of our yeast management. This is our micro lab, the beer that gets tested every step of the way. We have a lot of really fancy equipment here that can break down the liquid, like basically atomize it, turn it into molecules, and then we can identify if there's any off flavors in there, if there's any bacteria in there. It's also where we determine the alcohol, the IBUs, the bitterness units in the beer, the color, the EBC. That other third over here is our sensory room. Before we release any beer to the market, it's got to pass a pretty rigid tasting test, right? If you're a full-time employee here, you come to this room, you sit down in one of those cubicles, and all you might know is they may say, hey, we're doing unfiltered wheat today because we've got wheat that we want to send to the market. So then someone from the lab will lift up a door and give you a handful of cups of beer. And then it's the person tasting, it's their job to look at the beer, smell the beer, taste the beer, and then rate it objectively. Are you finding anything that shouldn't be there? Is it true to style? And then they submit their results. And at the end of the day, the lab takes all the information and looks at it, and they're looking for red flags. Everyone's palate is different. You have people who can pick up DMS really easy, like I can, and we have people who can pick up acetaldehyde. So we're covering all of our bases with all of the flavors. If everybody gives it a unanimous thumbs up, then we release it to our wholesalers. And we do that with every single beer that we brew that goes out into the market or is in the beer hall. In my opinion, it's one of the most important parts of the process.
This is Brewhouse 2. We brew everything in here. This is a linear system, so every vessel has a job, and we can piggyback a run so that we can do multiple batches. So while something is in the mill, something can be in the lauter tun, we move from the lauter to the boil, we can go from the mill to the mash, and we can keep doing that until we fill up a fermenter. You know, when we make beer, we're using 4 ingredients: water, barley, hops, and yeast. That's it. So water, that's the first ingredient. Those tanks down there are water that's been treated for whatever beer we're about to brew. They'll adjust the pH balance. They do charcoal filtration, sand filtration, and get that water ready. This next vessel is that second ingredient, barley. So in that tank, what we're doing is we're bringing in malted barley, fill up that tank, hit the barley with a little bit of water, and then below it is like 2 rollers that will crush those seeds, cracking that seed open so we have access to what's inside. At this point, it's called grist. We take the grist and we move it to the mash tun. We add hot water here, and that's gonna kick off an enzymatic process where the enzymes in those seeds will convert the starch to sugar. By the end of this process, over 2/3 of the original weight of all of that grain is now sugar. And that's what we want, because sugar is what becomes alcohol. So from here, we're gonna take it, and it's it's liquid and it's all the spent grain. So we're gonna pump everything from the mash tun to the lauter tun. Now the lauter tun, everything goes from the bottom to the top. And as this vessel fills up with the spent grain and the liquid, as it rests, all that spent grain is gonna fall to the bottom of this tank. We'll sparge it, we'll hit it with a little bit of water, but we're gonna drain that liquid that worked through that natural filter bed. But when all the liquid drains through that filter bed, we have all that spent grain. We're gonna collect that, and we give all that grain to farmers, and they use it as nutrient-rich livestock.
Absolutely.
All the liquid goes from the lauter tun to the boil kettle, and this is where we raise the temperature to a rolling boil. We're gonna sterilize the wort, caramelize some sugars. This is where we start adding in hops because the wort's so sweet. But this device here, this is something that you don't often see in a lot of breweries. All of these other vessels have a stovepipe that goes out so we can vent off the steam, vent off the DMS. Well, our engineer was like, we're creating a lot of steam that we're just releasing to the environment. That steam has energy, like we can use that. So he had this device installed, like manufactured in his own design. As long as you're boiling your liquid and venting the steam, DMS is highly volatile, so it will exit. Once the DMS levels are where we are at acceptable levels, what they do is they fill this tank with water. It's a water lock, and it captures all that steam, redirects all that steam downstairs. And then that steam helps insulate like the hot water pipes. It helps generate heat for other vessels to kind of raise the temperature. So we're using less water. We don't have to use as much hot water, and it also reduces our reliance on electricity. So it's very efficient. And again, it was when this was installed, we were the most efficient brew house in the world. After we're done with the wort, we've added hops, then we need to cool it down and remove any other leftover solid proteins. So this vessel is called the Whirlpool, and it does just what it sounds like. The wort spins in a circle, cools down, collects any proteins that have solidified, puts them in a nice, neat little cone in the bottom. That stuff is called trube. It loosely defines as like byproduct or waste.
Interesting.
So trube, we can compost it, so we do compost it.
That's a good use for it. Yeah. A lot of manufacturers feel the need to throw the word sustainability around all the time. You went far above and beyond that by just giving an example of how you're doing it.
Yeah, sustainability is like embedded in our DNA. Truth of the matter is, we know that every ingredient that we use to make beer comes from the earth. And so if we're not doing at least our small part here to protect the earth, then the earth will stop making what we need.
Yeah.
And if we don't have access to hops or barley, we're making sugar water.
Yeah.
Few people want to drink that.
So you have the bottling line, but then you also have the carton line. So the cartons go in flat. There's a carton erector that opens the carton up, seals the bottom shut, flips it upright. They go on their own journey. They meet here at the case packer. And then what that device does is it picks up 24 bottles, sets them gently down into an open carton. Then they wind around. The cartons get sealed shut. They get a code date on the side of the box. They go up a spiral conveyor belt, over the bottling line, down a spiral conveyor belt to the bottom floor where they get repalletized and then put on the back of a truck and sent to our warehouse. And it'll sit there for about 2 weeks until our lab says it's good to go, and then we release it to our wholesalers.
Got it.
Every part of the process has a very particular job.
What are the things you do to constantly remind yourselves you've got one of the coolest jobs in the world?
Honestly, when I come to work and I see people waiting outside to go take a tour, and it's nonstop, it's every day, we see people that want to be here to learn about the history of the company, to learn about how it's made, and then they get enthusiastic about drinking the beer. And you see people that have queued up for an experience that I get every day. That keeps me very, very happy. There are people beyond this zip code that have an appetite for this beer, and we get emails all the time where people are like a picture of a wedding in like Portland, Oregon, like we got married and we had to have tank 7, so you see the bride and groom with like tank 7. And those kind of moments, like it's like, yeah, see, that's why we do what we do. This is a memorable moment that people are sharing,
and we're a part of it.
And we're part of it.
In our way.
It's just it's really exciting.
Yeah.